So welcome to the committee and kaimahi of Matamata-Piako District Council, our first hui for 2024. Ngā mihi o te tauhou ki a koutou. Also welcome any members of the public should they choose to join us. A gentle reminder that we are live streaming, and unless we have any volunteers for karakia, I'll open. Like, me enoi tātou. Tukua te wairua ki a rere ki ngā taumata, pai ārahi i a tātou mahi, me tā tātou whai i ngā tikanga a rātou mā, kia mau kia ita, kia kore ai ingaro, kia pūpuri, kia whakamaua, kia tīna, huie, tai kia. And a quick translation of that, allow one spirit to exercise potential to guide us in our as well as in our pursuit of our ancestral traditions, take hold and preserve it, ensure it is never lost, hold fast, secure it, draw together firm. And while I'm also talking, well, in terms of karakia, just special shout out to those who have lost whānau members over the period that we have since we met. So kia paha, kia mai, kia mana wanui. Kia ora tātou. Item will be apologies, which we have from Matamata, and it looks like we've got Kevin. So, and just checking, morena, Happy New Year. Just checking that we are actually long hui today.
You're looking at me for that.
Yeah, exactly. So may I have a mover and a seconder for our apologies, please?
I'll move.
Fire Joanne is moving.
And I'll second.
And Mayor Adrian is seconding. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, kumana carried. Any declarations of interest? No? Cool. And then the first item that we'll quickly move into is the minutes for our previous hui held in December, which our governance team has actually asked us to carry over until Steph had an opportunity to review them. So I'm just checking that that's okay with the committee. Apply. And welcome Renee from Audit New Zealand. Oh, welcome to the Audit New Zealand team. We have a short but significant agenda today, so let's go team. The first one, although we have item 7.1, I might just ask Don to give us a quick update in terms of what's happening at MPDC since we've last had a hui. Just a few couple verbal comments and then we'll move forward.
Well, the major effort that's been underway for the last couple of months is the delivering of the LTP draft form, working with council closely and debating that, and a number of major, perhaps capital work have commenced as well, particularly in our three water space. And I'm just trying to think off the top of my head what other significant issues. Manai and Niall, have you got anything to add to that?
I think I could say to Tiamana, this meeting has been a major focus for the team to be ready for this and then to be ready for the audit. So I was talking to Niall a minute ago, and there's a sense of relief to an extent that we have a document that we can present. So I'm not saying it's perfect, but there is that sense of the team finally getting something that's hopefully coherent.
On a personal level too, could I just acknowledge the passing of Steve Hancock, who was their IT manager. For 40 years Steve worked here, and he passed away shortly before Christmas Day, and his funeral was held subsequently that week over at the Terra Event Centre. And it was a very thoughtful service regards his life, not only in IT, but also in other aspects of the community and the district. So it was it is a significant loss to the organisation.
Thank you, Don, for that update, and probably a timely reminder to, life is short, focus on your passions and go for it. Kia ora. With that, could we please move to item 7.1 on the agenda, and guessing we've got Niall presenting. Self-explanatory.
Yes, it is actually.
Yeah. Unless you want to make a few comments, we can go directly to.
Yeah, directly to it. So this was really just an update from the last meeting where the committee had sought some changes to the way the work program was laid out to identify the previous agenda item that item related to, and just restructure things and incorporate those matters that you had asked us to include. So hopefully we have now fulfilled that. And so, yeah, just really reporting it back to this committee for your approval.
Next question.
Yeah, I think it's concise, you know, like it's really laid things out quite well in a sense of what's standard, what comes up, what, you know, like I quite like it's quite clear now. We've added in a couple of things, and if there's no further comment, I'm happy to move.
I'm happy to second.
I think perfect.
I might make just two quick comments. Is I would like to see us have a verbal CEO report each week, just to give context in terms of what's happening in the organisation. And then the other one, at the moment, it says that the safety and wellness report isn't applicable, but I do think it should come to each time. So those are only comments. But I don't know that we need to. So, Niall, did you get it in terms of having the CEO verbal report mentioned, and then the safety and wellness being not if required, but a standing report?
Okay.
Well, I guess the thing is for us, it's a belt and braces approach, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is the key to risk and assurance is belt and braces.
So would you like just on the CEO report update, would you like that as an identified item?
As a standing item.
It is the it's your.
We've got chairs update, so we can just make
And
it
just a CEO.
CEO. And with the safety and wellness one, what would be the frequency for that?
So my
Would you see that at each meeting?
Each week, unless it's a special one, that is particular with the focuses for information to the LTP.
I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that amendment. Yeah, it's over.
Hi, Joanne.
Yes, I second that.
All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. So, well done, team. Next item on the agenda, Niall is staying for 7.2. Over to you, Niall. Quick summary, please, and probably potentially pointing out any significant changes since the last time we saw you.
Great, thank you. So this report is really to provide the committee with an update on progress towards the LTP. I'll just leave that. So previously I had presented to the committee a breakdown of all the key tasks related to the LTP and the status of those. You'll see this report, I haven't done that because largely those are now closed out, and we've moved to the next phase of basically starting the audit process. So the other aspect of this report is in relation to the 3 water reforms. So essentially the Minister for Local Government has written to Council signalling that the incoming coalition government intends to repeal and replace the 3 water reforms. And they are intending to introduce legislation to that effect in February. And all of the previous legislation that related to the water reforms will be repealed, and the Local Government Act as it stood prior to the water reforms will be reinstated. So the effect of that in relation to the long-term plan is that we need to integrate the water services, the 3 water services, into our LTP for the 10-year period, 10-year planning period. And because Council, because that is a change to the existing legislation, the government have provided 4 options for Council for transitional options for us to develop our LTPs. So in brief, we can use the standard procedure that Council has traditionally followed. That is the audit of the consultation document and audit of the final LTP. we can proceed on the basis of an unaudited consultation document. We have the option to defer the long-term plan up to 30th of September 2024, noting that if we choose that option, the annual report would also be extended out to December. If we started under the old Act, as it stands at the moment, we need to add in 3 audits as far as possible. That doesn't apply to this council, so that's really for the likes of Tauranga City Council who have already consulted on their LTP, so just providing them that pathway. They're still considering whether or not there's an option to defer the LTPs for another year, i.e. to 2025, so I'm not sure whether that's going to be progressed. So essentially the report canvasses the pros and cons of those options, and I've set out the letter from the Minister and some legal advice provided by Simpson Grierson, which steps us through each of those options, the legalities involved. And so my suggestion for this committee is that we proceed as we are. We proceed on the basis of option 1, which is continuing with the planned audit that commences next week, and we work to the 30th of June deadline, just as we currently have programmed. So yeah, I'll leave it there, Madam Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Okay. No, there's no comments. I think we're well in progress. I think to defer to September would just be a mess. You know, we work to a schedule that's we're on track pretty much, and let's just keep going. I guess the 3 waters issue is a fascinating one, to say the least, and with the uncertainty, but I think we just have to manage it as best as we can under the circumstances.
I'd like to thank the team for studying all the options. I mean, and when I started reading through them, I got to, I think, option 2, and I thought, oh yeah, let's go with this one. And then I went to option 3, and I thought, okay, so there's some advantages. And then when you get right down the bottom and then you recommend an option that best suits the staff, you're best in the position to actually work on it. And when I looked at what impacted, and I'm thinking, the only thing we can't determine here is what the government, or when the government is going to repeal or change or defer anything. And I think that to carry on the best way and with the information that you have is the best option. And so I support the recommendation the staff were making.
Any comments from you, Kevin?
I agree with Joanne completely. Good recommendation by the staff in conjunction with talking to other consultants and that as well. So cool.
I just wrote my option. It's the only option.
So from my perspective, I think the team has done a great job presenting a great paper that outlines the different options that are available based on the information that has been presented to them at that time, and has stepped us through the advantages and disadvantages and risks of each of those options. And from my perspective, congratulations, team. I'm happy to support as well. Within the letter from the Minister, it talks about information in relation to waters. I'll bring very specific wording around making sure that there's information in there for people. That says,
That's at the 3rd bullet point, or
Yeah.
4th bullet point into heading 1.
yeah, exactly. So I just want to get assurance from you, Niall, that we're covered in that space. Yeah, just in relation to waters, there was a specific requirement of us in relation to that.
Yeah, and I think we've achieved that. We had prior to this letter, we had intended to put the waters into the long-term plan, and that's what we've done. So I think we've satisfied that, subject to anything that additional that might come through this legislation. But if it's just a return of what was previously in the Local Government Act, then we've covered that.
Excellent. So if we move to the recommendation, which was to receive the report and recommend to council that the team continue with the LTP adoption by 30 June 2024. Can I please have a mover and a second?
I'll move.
Hi, Joanne is moving.
I'll second.
And we have okay, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Oh my God. That was a great paper. Thank you.
Yeah, good.
The same people will be on the council agenda tomorrow for them to review. So it's just the recommendation from this committee will hopefully help inform that discussion.
Now we're moving on to 7.2, review of draft liability management policy and a draft investment policy. Lania? Oh, hello, Lania. Happy New Year, haven't they? Yeah. And maybe just a quick summary, and thank you for the Word document that was sent out yesterday to provide a little bit more context. Thanks, Susan. Ultimately, we'll take it as read, but happy to receive any comments that you have.
So, morning, welcome back. Yeah, so I guess the key thing with this review is there's probably three key things. How effective is the policy? I didn't have any specific areas of concern. I guess if you've got any specific areas of concern. A second thing is we've proposed some changes to the policy there. So if you've got any questions on those changes that we're proposing. And then probably the third and meatier aspect that I will through to is the net debt to revenue percentage that we have in our policy and potential issues around that in terms of sustainability.
Comments? Yeah. Any comments, committee members?
Probably on that debt.
Yes.
So you would.
So maybe we cover off the debt to revenue.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, debt ratio. Well, one moment when I was coming in and then so from my perspective, if it stays at 150, the process for it to change to another number would surely be to come back to this committee for referral to council.
Yeah, I guess we'd need to check it against the significance and engagement policy, whether that triggered anything. But yeah, I see it more as being something through this committee, and then it would be an annual plan consultation as to raising the limit.
Claudia Kotu. So if you've seen the financial strategy, you will see there is a heavy emphasis on highlighting some of the key drivers of our finances, our debt, our capital, which is the three waters. And as part of that process and developing that financial strategy, we posed the question of having two different rating benchmarks, something that we haven't done in the past, two different rating benchmarks, one for the three waters and one for the non-three waters. The driver for that being that the three waters costs, we've got external influences, regulators, regional council, that can dictate to an extent what we do. So whatever plan we put in place, that could change quite rapidly because of something they require us to do. So it seemed to me, and I think what we discussed as council, that separating out those benchmarks might make sense. And so I put that as the strategy. But looking at that whole profile of debt, capital, posed the question to me about, well, what does the three waters look like on its own? And to be honest, I was a little bit shocked when I did the debt to revenue ratio. Sorry?
290.
Well, the debt to revenue ratio for three waters gets as high as 400%. And at the end of the 10-year period, it's 317%. And there's a graph in the financial strategy that shows the rates movements for general rates and the three waters rates. And you will see that the Manhattan peaks high and then drops right off. But at 300% debt to revenue ratio for the three waters, in my opinion, that's not sustainable for the long term. That's it does not make it. If I can offer an opinion, it doesn't make sense to me to have very low rate increases for the three waters in the second 5 years of the plan when there's such a high debt component sitting over the top of that sector. Whether anything happens with the three waters or not, even if it's kept internally, three waters, our concept of funding particularly the water and wastewater, is that it's user charges. And what that says to me is that the level of revenue for those areas is not sustainable for the long term. And so it's not an issue right now because well, what I mean right now, in terms of the documents.
Sorry, what do you mean by the level of revenue is not sustained?
Well, if our revenue to debt ratio is 300% for three waters, and we know that our LGFA borrowing agent has a maximum of 175%, that's one marker. But even if we were a corporate of just utilities with nothing else, I would suggest to you that the debt revenue ratio that you might be aiming might be about 250%, somewhere in that order. Certainly not, I doubt, at 300%. And my concern is that post the 10-year time frame, looking at over 30 years, we've actually got some big capital coming in as well. It's not dropping away. So the question I want to pose to you, or to council actually, we've got a document that's ready for audit and it's based on what we know now. But a policy strategic issue that I feel council needs to consider before it adopts the document for consultation is whether it's prudent to have very low rate increases in the second 5 years of the plan for that area. Okay, you can do it. And we can easily switch, in my view, up the headroom, our debt to revenue ratio to 175%, and we would have headroom. But what I'm saying is the strategy has forced me to look under the hood, and under the hood, there's another story going on, which and if you go back to the previous discussion about whether or not we should have three waters into the long-term plan or not, the financial strategy is dominated by the three waters. So it's such a big part of our story that we agreed 100% with the recommendation that you are endorsing, that the three waters are in there. But look, all I'm saying is there's another story below. So it's not just about increasing the headroom or the ratio to 175. It's saying let's look below that a little bit and ask ourselves the question about whether or not that key part of our entity is operating at a sustainable level. And that's what I mean about sustainable. The revenue, in my opinion, and I modelled it, just for example, I said, well, let's just say that instead of dropping off in the second 5 years for the three waters, we continued at, say, 7% per year, because that's the benchmark that I put in there. And by the end of the 10 years, the debt to revenue ratio for three waters comes down to about 260%. So it's starting to get into what I believe is possibly a more prudent level for that kind of utility. So I hope I haven't confused things too much.
No, I'm totally confused, but that's, because I haven't really got my head around, this is me trying to understand the process, right? How the hell do we tell our ratepayers? How do we explain it to the ratepayer as to how this whole process goes? That's the worrying thing for me.
Yeah, so I would refer you to what I wanted to flag up to you is really, and you don't have to make a decision now. It's a strategic decision for council before it adopts the draft plan. What I wanted to just highlight to you is it's not a simple matter of putting it up to 175% in my view. That's only part of the picture. We can do that, and there will be no, in my opinion, there will be no problem from our lenders for us to do that. but it's more about what we see under the bonnet as to what is the prudent step to take going forward.
I guess the key point here is that only part of the ratepayer base receives that service and they're paying for it. And that's when you lift the bonnet, that's where you've exposed this higher percentage. When you just put it in the whole pool, yeah, it's hidden, it's diluted, but technically it is only a portion of the ratepayer base that pays for that capital. So what have other councils, where do other councils sit in this? Do you have any
I'm talking,
clues?
coincidentally, I had a conversation with Fitch Rating Agency this morning, wanting to talk to us. We have not gone to get a credit rating formally before, but with this debt profile, we may well be looking for that in the future. And I mentioned to them that our profile is changing quite dramatically. They said that's very consistent with what they're seeing from, they've got 10 other clients in New Zealand, local government clients, very consistent with what they're seeing. I don't know how many councils, it would be very easy not to pull this out. It was just the fact that we had talked about 2 different benchmarks that started me asking the question. So I don't know whether anybody else is doing that. Quite probably, they may well be. I think this is what I've got from the analysis, is what comes out for me. So
In the back of my head, when we were looking, very in the early days of Three Waters, we were looking at what our debt ratios were and what have you. And I recall the figures of Hamilton and Tauranga being in the 500%. But was that overall, or was it just Three Waters debt now?
They potentially are all, because they're a city, all their ratepayers would pay.
Yeah,
that's possibly
yes,
why.
Yeah, but
there is differentiation.
The fact is that our overall debt and then the Three Waters debt is quite, it's very wide, isn't it? I just wondered whether when those figures came out in those early discussion days of Three Waters, they were talking about Three Waters debt, not overall debt. Sorry, I'm
and I think that's absolutely a valid point if I can comment. Sorry to cut somebody off, but look, we can, as I mentioned before, we can either increase our debt level to 175 or even go with this and have discussions with our lenders as it is, because we don't breach our cap for very long or by too much. Okay, so at a high level, it's not a panic situation at all. What I wanted to flag is the strategic issue for consideration post the audit, and as I say, this strategy is very heavily influenced by the Three Waters, so it's something to consider. I mean, the question I might ask, if I could, Te Tiamana, how does the council, how does the committee feel about a debt to revenue ratio for Three Waters, which is in excess of 300%? How does that feel?
Not good.
I think he's got a question. Maybe enough.
I wonder if we didn't consider going to 175 with the overall ratio, what that's going to affect other things outside of Three Waters. So there'll be things that fall off the radar because we can't afford them, because we're undergoing Three Waters projects that need to get done based on what the government tells us needs to be done and when. So it's going to affect other things if we don't increase it. That's the way I'm hearing it.
That's a fair point, and that's a point that Lani has made in her report, that we lose our headroom. It means that we have enjoyed some comfort that if we had an unexpected event come up, that we had capacity. That capacity with our debt profile in this long-term plan, draft long-term plan, completely different. So you're absolutely right, Councillor Tapham, that increasing to 175 at least gives us some contingency. So, and I'm not suggesting we don't go there. I'm actually suggesting, I would say we do that, but we also ask ourselves the question, or we adopt a draft about what we do with the three waters as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I suspect, and I think the chairman said to me, it's a industry-wide issue. As obviously there's limited feedback on that, and just by, I mean, one way I've thought about it when I raised the issue is whether you, by inference, if you look at the global situation, you're saying that the ratepayers who don't enjoy that service effectively are backing up the potential for something going on. In other words, we will draw on our general ratepayers, whereas our funding policy doesn't actually say that. Our funding policy says that people who receive the service will pay for the service. So what happens if a disaster happens and the dam in Lawrenceville falls over?
It was 50 million.
Well, that's right, and we blow the 175, but we've got to use general rate to make the repair. I mean, the likelihood of that is obviously minor, but I think in Manaia identifying this issue, it's a question of, I suppose an analogy might be, and it might be a poor analogy, I don't know, but if you were a company, a holding company, had several businesses under your control, and you looked at one part of one of the businesses and said, well, that business is potentially creating a liability where the other companies might be exposed in some way. I don't know. It's and as I was saying to the chief before the meeting, I mean, the question of 150, 175, to some extent, it's a question of attitude or question of attitude or approach. I mean, if you say we'll keep it at 150, and I'm not suggesting that decision gets made today, but if you say let's keep it at 150 and we'll deal with it if we have to, we might be able. It means we have to consciously think about what we're going to do, because it's just not a figure on a bit of paper. It drives your decision making in terms of what you're going to do and not do. Because if you are voluntarily adopting a 150 position or a 160 position, it means different decisions have to be given consideration.
So if we look at three, we are driven, what we're required to do is driven by the regulation now, because if it wasn't in place, we would say, well, we can't do that. We haven't got the money to sustain it. So we'll do as much as we can within our debt levels and what have you. So I have a question relating to Three Waters funding. So if we were to align ourselves to a regional water entity with other councils, with the objective of achieving a greater efficiency to, in theory, reduce our costs, do we contribute to a collective pot of money for use wherever the need is seen as the greatest? Or do we only provide funding for the work on our assets?
If you took either with the two, there's two different sort of positions, if you like. I mean, effectively, the efficiency that the proposed reform was driving, amongst other things, was a cross-subsidisation. No doubt about it.
It was, yes.
Yeah, and that was, some people might be uncomfortable with that, but if I, without trying to be provocative, if I could make an analogy, is that we cross-subsidise internally anyway. Lawrenceville cross-subsidises Matamata.
mentioned that to you yesterday.
So you're taking that
Yes.
small area of cross subsidisation and you're expanding it. So the philosophy, whether it's at district level or regional level, was cross subsidisation allows you to address areas in order of priority in a manner that would not be possible if the particular district stood on its own. The first example of saying any revenue rate in this district should be spent in this district, you'll get limited efficiency gains because you potentially will be able to reduce overhead, bring expertise to the table that you would otherwise not have. But the reality is you would not fully realise that. And another analogy is our roading network. Auckland raises so much revenue and petrol tax, Northland doesn't. Who's going to pay for Northland roads?
Look, it was I did send it to you, didn't I? On Messenger. Because I'm just trying to get a feeling of just how we're going to be looking at things in 2 years' time or 3 years' time as to where I want to understand whether we'll be funding according to what we think our assets are, or what our share of the overall asset requirement will be for an entity.
Can I be clear, in terms of the issue that I'm raising, I put that aside.
Yeah.
And I've said to myself, in 2033, we are proposing to have a Three Waters rate increase of around about 1%. And at the same time, our debt to revenue ratio for Three Waters is about 300%. So that doesn't make sense to me on the face of it. So I would raise this issue, putting aside water's not going anywhere, staying with us, on the basis of our policy that waters are self-funding. Is that a prudent level of revenue change, in my opinion? And Councillor Tappan's absolutely right, that, and as the Chief Executive just pointed out, it has an effect on what else we can do.
And then that's a round out to try and make a decision on this.
Yeah, I guess my question is around the 150 and how the decision was made and how long ago. Like, is it 20 years ago or?
We were comfortably under. The 150 was like a prudent benchmark.
Yeah.
That was kind of like a norm.
Yeah.
We could go as high as 175, but when we do our long-term plan, we never got close to that. Why would you have a benchmark? I recall some of the discussion actually of the council, can hear it. You know, you don't put that up as a target.
No. That's probably my point is if we were to leave it at 150, are we at risk of saying, oh, we can't afford it? When technically at 175, because we're faced in a space here where there's must-dos. These aren't discretionary spends. These are actually regulatory spends. And yes, to have a arbitrary 150 seems in a time when 150 doesn't actually what that was set at and what money buys now, we are in a different environment. So, but again, the Three Waters is sort of another debate again. And I guess my assumption is, if you did look at it, is that if there's balance sheet separation, well, those people that are paying for the water will still be paying for the water, the general rate, like that. And so we need, I guess that's where it's a vanilla thing that those that receive it pay for it. So your 1%, because I'm trying to understand what you mean by your 1% rate increase, is that like if our debt ratio was still 175, but if you separated out the water and it was 300, does that 1% actually, where do you come to the 1% decision? Do you take into account the
1% I'm quoting in the financial strategy, we've broken out the rate increases over the 10 years between Three Waters and non-Three Waters, which is the theme that we've had right through the strategy. And the Manhattan, as I say, shows a big increase in that for the next 5 years. At the end, tails right off. it makes us look as though things are under control. That's what it looks like with those low rate increases in the last 5 years.
And that's not, yeah.
Well,
a
that's the
little
question
bit-
I ask.
Yeah, doesn't matter.
Very much in the shadow of the knowledge that you two have in relation to this issue. When I looked at the strategy and I looked overall at the document, I kept thinking about, and this is very naive, I kept thinking about what can we afford? What's sustainable? And what kind of figure gives you the room to move without putting us way over or without us holding ourselves back? And so it might be quite naive, but in some ways, you know, if we suddenly have an earthquake or Mount Tarawha falls down, this becomes a non-discussion. I rely on, of course, you can only rely on giving advice to council about. I think that in looking at it, those things are really, really important. How sustainable are we? And can we do the work that we want to do in a not exactly safe, but I mean, that's a word I'll use, in a way in which it allows us to grow and develop. It doesn't hold us back. But in the same time, if we have a major environmental upset, you know, I don't expect that we don't still develop, but can we also, you know, take care of that as well? And yes, we may have to change the options that we're looking at, but the whole thing for me was about those issues. And so after listening to you and debt ratios and everything, it comes down to those things for me as a ratepayer, as a person that's I'm going to be out telling, you know, if I had to tell people, what are we looking at here and what does that actually mean? What's the bottom line for us? And can the council take care of that for us and give us some good direction?
And so our recommendation on response to those questions would be take your debt level to a prudent rate, which is still considered to be a prudent ratio by local government financing association agency, to 175% because it gives you headroom, more headroom. It gives you that contingency if you need it, which we've had in the past. That's how we would. The questions are absolutely valid.
I see it as an insurance policy. Adrian was saying that only the people who get the service will end up paying it, but if we don't increase it, we will not be able to do some things that will benefit those people that aren't paying for water. So they'll actually end up being affected negatively because we can't afford to do those things. So yeah, that's kind of a double-edged sword. Should I go to 200? Seriously, I mean, why wait until the shit has hit the fan before we actually give ourselves the headroom we need to do what we need to do? Government's going to make us do 3 waters. We have no choice. But it's the other things that we want to do, the nice to haves, that will end up being turned aside because we just can't afford it if we don't give ourselves the headroom. So, I mean, I wouldn't be adverse to going to 200. I mean, it's an arbitrary figure, as Adrian said. It's not a target. It just gives us headroom to do what we want to do. Just my thoughts.
Yeah, I guess. Okay, so the 175% is the limit that our lending agency will go to at this point. For a council of our size, some other like Hamilton City Council has a bigger ratio, I think like 250 or maybe, yeah. So that's our sort of limit at the moment.
Right. Okay. No, we could always apply for more, Ladia. Special dispensation.
So just checking that the recommendation will then shift to we receive the report, we provide comment, and then a specific recommendation to change that ratio from current 150 to 175, which is the maximum allowed by the LGFA. Is that what the recommendation, or is that where it would land?
That's where it would land if council wants to, and as member raised, that she wanted some comfort level. That's where we would go to respond to it. We could, as Lani pointed out, like now belts and say let's live with it within our means. But I think that we're not used to not having headroom in our debt. We're not used to that, so we're comfortable at 175.
I just want to answer a question that you'd asked before about whether the committee was comfortable with the debt to revenue ratio of 3 orders of over 300. And to me, that should be answered by our risk appetite for Matamata-Piako District Council. And so that's probably what I don't necessarily see in here to give us an understanding of what our appetite is for that. That's just a minor technicality. Okay, so that's what our new recommendation is. But before we move to that, do we have any comments on either the liability management or the investment policies which form part of this statement?
That my comments are largely superficial. So
I'll just a quick comment. Is there any particular reason why it's not called a borrowing policy versus a liability management policy? I was just trying. I had to keep reminding myself that it was a liability management policy and what it was.
I think that's what's referred to in the local government act.
Right, okay. So
That's where it's come from.
Therein lies the responses.
so it could be liability brackets borrowing.
Well, that's like in layperson's terms, that's what I keep thinking about it to be. The other thing that I'll point out from my perspective is within the investment policy, it has a delegated authority section, but it doesn't have that within the liability management policy. And I'm just curious why that was. It does speak to some of those things, but it doesn't have what the set procedure is given. It's borrowing quite a lot of money on behalf of the council. Just something for consideration. Any other comments?
I personally, right at the moment, I'm not comfortable with moving from 150.
I just want to look at the policies first, except for that
Okay.
debt to revenue ceiling. I just want to see if there's anything else that we need to fluff
No
out,
issue.
which I don't get the sense that there is. So let's now hone in on
So I was going to ask, are you happy with moving to a 3-year review as opposed to an annual review as it currently stands? It's sort of the sector.
Yeah.
It's a 3-year review.
Yeah, that seems absolutely reasonable. I think the key part of that is that if required to come back. So if there was anything that was flagged as a result of an activity that happened or did not happen, then I guess we would expect to see those policies come back prior to that 3-year term having expired. I don't know what that trigger would be though. So I'm comfortable for it to move to the 3-year term. Do we have a level of comfort around the table around the 3-year term? It's currently annual review.
Yeah.
Shifting
Happy
to
with
3-year.
that. I'm fine.
Yeah, makes sense. Great. All right. So let's come back to our somewhere between 150 and 175.
I guess for me, the recommendation to have that headroom, I'm happy to move between 150 and 175. And I know that it'll then come down to council and Bruce and I'm talking to the council about what they're actually happy to do. But I'm happy to move that from the ordinary risk or ordinary insurance. Yeah.
Just wondering, oh, sorry.
We do need that, obviously still have tension on our on our debt and back to when I was point before, limits and targets. But I also know that budgets live and breathe, and we need to have some flexibility there. So I'm comfortable with 175 on that basis. But as long as it's still, like I say, tension on it, we're not just steaming towards that just because we can.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I guess following on for that is that if we left it at 150 and we breached it or we're about to breach it, what is the process? That's the thing, because there is obviously evidence there that 150 is going to come under a huge amount of pressure in coming years. So if we left it at 150, what is the process if we breach it? Because we have to, there might be an have to, not discretionary.
Public
It
consultation.
strikes me that, it strikes me that I would just ask Lenny and I, when do we breach? And it's year 3 that we breached 150 based on our assumptions at this stage. Now, whether you want to be given the other issue that has been raised by the team regarding the specific area of Three Waters, where there's an argument to say that the decision is that rather than move to 175 at this point, but rather undertake, you know, I'm not being flippant, so you've got time to think about, and some of these numbers will be given greater clarity. The government's regulatory framework for maintenance and renewable programs that they're going to put into regulation will presumably come to greater fruition. Whether or not there's an argument to say, well, let's have a more considered debate on the matter. I'm not saying we should, I'm just suggesting that that might be an approach.
So I guess that, because again, it's the unknown of the Three Waters, and potentially there is an expectation that there'll be some kind of aggregation or whatever. So in 3 years' time, we'll have more certainty around that, presumably, as to where it's heading.
Well, perhaps another way of looking at it is, I think this reasonably is, if you're comfortable, there's an acknowledgement that there is an issue here. Two aspects to this that are to this deemed revenue. One is the 150, but also it is, as Monopoly said, under the bonnet, the issue of the Three Waters. But by formally acknowledging that, and then asking for further advice or a consideration of that, whether that's something that so it doesn't get lost.
Do we have a difficulty if we stay at 150? Do we have a difficulty, given the figures you were showing in the LTP over the the next few years, where we breach it? Does that mean that we have a difficulty in passing that LTP?
And the issue for me comes down to the cost of borrowing and what our lenders view about our actions, because they look at the governance. That's a driver for them in terms of saying this council is well managed. We'll give them the benefit of the low rate, and this is the conversation I want to have with with our advisors and with Fitch. Here's our profile. Here are some actions we can take. What are the things that are important in terms of making sure that our cost of borrowing is as low as possible? And are we better to go to 175 and have that headroom and demonstratively show that we're living within that, or can we show something else without changing that ratio that ensures that we still get the best rates? So that's cost of borrowing in the back of my mind, and our lenders' attitude, which is the thing that I'm trying to look at. So I don't.
And I'm trying to look at it and saying, by keeping it at 150, we are being very prudent to our ratepayers and saying we know that we can't go above that, and so therefore we are not wasting money. Wasting money is not. We are not spending money that we can't afford.
And that's exactly the kind of question too. Like, I've got no showing in our profile which says we breached for a couple of years and then we're back in comfort zone again. Well, not comfort zone, but we're back below, within compliance. What do you think of that profile? How does that influence the rates that we might be charged for our borrowing? So that's part of the equation. That part of the discussion I can't answer at this point, but those are the questions that we have for our advisors and a rating agent that's been contacting us.
And I guess to add to that is, where does our capital works occur? We've always talked about that we don't achieve, we budget for something, but we don't achieve 100% of it. It's around 80. So I guess
Just the assumption that we're making is that the plan will go to plan.
Yeah.
Not all things go to
the plan, and never had. So, given that capital works space. And I guess but the other red flag is the additional cost with inflation is the stuff that, just got, and with regulatory environment, the things that we had budgeted for 3 years ago are significantly dearer now. And that's also put the pressure on this 150. And that's the other hairy item.
So I just want to test the recommendation. So what I'm hearing is the current recommendation is 150, because 150 debt to revenue ratio. But there's more work to be done to understand whether it'll be more prudent to be 175 or somewhere between 150 to 175. And we still have time to understand what that number looks like, because although we're not expecting to see this policy come back for 3 years, that impact of the breach is not going to happen for 3 years. So just wanted to test that. And to the point that have been made around there's a plan, the CapEx program might not go to plan, and therefore that headroom may not be required. I just get the sense that there is more information that could be provided once a little more certainty is had in relation to this space that would necessitate us shifting from a 150 to higher. Although, from what we've heard, there is appetite to shift to 175, but once we've got that data that supports that. So I just wanted to test, do any of the members still want to shift it to 175?
I think the thing for me is about if we constrain, like I'm probably the most conservative in terms of this, but if we constrain too much, and when you look at what's going to come up and everything, do we do ourselves a disservice by saying you're there and you watch these good rates, or the rates that I was talking about, go past us, and we're still stuck here? And it's like, it's trying not to, we're requiring good information in order for us to make those decisions. And so there's a lot of trust in the team that is supporting the council to make those decisions. And so I don't want to put a constraint, like I don't want to go up to 200% like Kevin might want to go, but I don't want to put a constraint there that might actually do us some damage because we haven't moved. And so we might breach in 3 years' time, as pointed out in this kind of example, but we don't know. It only takes one thing in the next 6 months and we're gone, and we've already just set the policy. So for me, and I mean, we don't make the decision, the council gets to make the decision, but I think that if we constrain us too much, we're at a disadvantage then too. So we've relied on our human staff to give us the information to make good decisions, as best decisions as we can make, or the council can make. And that's where I still am. I'm not pretending, I have a business degree and I'm thinking, what? But so let's look at that though, in terms of knowing, let's not lock ourselves into something that we need to be able to. What if it's 52? What if it's 55 that we need to be in? So that's where I stand. I mean, still comes down to council to make a final decision, but I'm a little bit more.
Councillor, final comments? Yeah.
I still look at the paragraph on page 46 that says another option is to leave it at 150, noting the breach would only be if we did spend all our capital, all right, and retaining the current level of 150 and challenging ourselves to operate within that would ensure that we retain an appropriate level of tension on our debt. And I like that. All right, I like the fact that we're having to really work to do it.
Great, robust discussion. I'm going to move us to the recommendation, which is the committee receives the report and the committee provides comment. So just confirming that receiving the report equates to the policy stays as is, which is a net to debt, a ratio of 150. Okay, so
is that the
I guess there's a lot to consider. Yeah, I think that's the question, isn't it, Kev? And that'll be I guess that the thing for us as a committee, we're obviously in different spaces too, and I guess it's all those things to consider. And I appreciate what you've said, Joanne, is that there's an assumption there that we won't spend our, we never have, so that's potentially one of the key assumptions. But if something significant happens in this district where we have to borrow money and we've set ourselves 150, knowing that we're getting closer and closer to 175, is it not prudent to actually to have some forward thinking and say, well, yeah, it's not a target. There is still going to be restraint on spending. The 150 sort of quietly is where we want to be, but we're giving ourselves some headroom for the unknown, perhaps. And year 3, if we don't address it now, well, year 4 or year 3, you know, like where are we? What happens? And we're not in the long-term plan year again, because then we've got to go out for consultation. So I'm trying to get my head around: do we front foot it now, or do we leave it for the next long-term plan? I'm sitting on the fence on that.
Yeah, to me, as I said before, to me, it's an insurance policy. It enables us to make decisions, which we won't be able to make if we leave it at 150. I mean, it's like turning 16, guys. It's legal, but it's not compulsory. It's not a target. We don't have to use it if we don't want to. It literally.
Right of the day. Interesting analogy, Kevin.
So I don't think it's going to be as simple as taking the recommendation as it is. So I think we're going to have to test the 150 or 175 first, and then that will determine what the policy will finally state. So is that okay? That we do that?
So just to clarify, if I am saying, like, let's use the headroom between those two figures. I'm not saying that it has. I'm saying that's the limit, 175. I'm not going between that, but I mean, if you find that I need to be at 160 because it calls for that because of whatever's happening, you know. So I'm not putting that actual figure. I'm just saying let's not go beyond 175, but I just want the image to be able to be movement if in fact it calls for it.
But what that's going to do is it's going to create another process whereby the team will have to do a review to then determine what the number is. So we're either creating headroom and going 175 because there are so many options between 150 and 175, or we're leaving it as is. And to Councillor Bruce's point on page 46, it talks about challenging ourselves to operate within that limit, because I don't think that we have time to test every single number over 150.
Right.
So I'm getting the sense that the option is 150, so policy stays as is, 175, or the other one could be to send it back to the team to do more work on it, which might have implications for the LTP CD process.
We want to resolve it before the draft is adopted.
Which is why I'm going to the extreme ends of the policy or the LGT. Okay, all right, well, let's start with 150. Can we maybe have a show of hands whether there's keenness on 150?
I'm 150, but I'll accept the 175.
Okay, so I propose that we change the we ask for the policy to be changed to reflect a 175, and then we go back to the original recommendation of receiving the report and having provided comments. Okay?
Yes.
Is everyone clear on that?
Yeah, sorry, I mean, just whether we still need to put that bit about still having the tension on, you know, because we've got the flexibility, but we'd still, you know, again, limits and targets.
Noting that the 170 is not.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So the recommendation is receive the report and provide comments, and probably need to state it that the committee has agreed to change the policy the revenue ratio from 150 to 175. However, the 175 is not a target. It is there to create headroom. And
for extreme,
as an insurance policy for the team in case any contingency would do.
Right, it's just so we get our wording
Okay.
correct.
We have the committee provide feedback to council to increase to 175 to allow flexibility, noting this is not a target.
Yep.
Are we happy with that?
So we just want to make sure we get the wording right.
That's fine.
Yeah, no, I think that's, yeah, and again, it's been prudent to give us that headroom. You can look at it in two ways.
I move.
Joanne is moving. Second, please.
Yep.
Councillor Bevan is seconding. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Good one. Woo!
No, that was good for us to make,
Yeah.
though. We needed to have it.
So the other consideration still is this issue about the three waters and assuming that we need to perhaps give some further thought and see where the industry's at and then buy sense.
But not for decision today.
No.
For future consideration once more information is known.
Yeah.
And which will come to this committee to then forward to council any appropriate thoughts.
Yeah.
Cover. You don't look happy, team.
No. I am going to raise the same discussion if I can, Chairman, and I'm going to raise the same discussion tomorrow because it's come about by reflecting on what the story is, and so I feel we have to put the same questions to council. We don't need a decision from council tomorrow, but I do think that it's something that should be considered before the draft is adopted. And what should be considered is whether or not we're going to proceed in the second 5 years of the long-term plan with very low utility three waters rate increases, very low. And you'll see that in your financial strategy, what they are. They're very low, and that's the strategic issue which I think we need to reflect on. And we can go ahead with that. And if I hadn't done the analysis, we wouldn't even be having the conversation. But this is what's come out from the analysis to me.
So how do you see that working in relation to, you're saying that decision will need to be made prior to the document being adopted? So
I feel that we need for council to have the opportunity to make, it doesn't have to make any change. I mean, we are ready for audit, we can go ahead, and this issue can be sitting, that's fine. It's just that you kind of know what you know, and I feel an obligation to at least allow council the opportunity to consider that and decide whether or not it should, in its draft, put it in there that we don't have. So, and I really apologise that this has come up in this way, but it was only through the analysis that it came up.
well, the good thing is that it has come up, right? And so then it feels like a material issue or significant issue. Let's use that word. And I'm just wondering what the expectation is in relation to this committee, in relation to what you've stated.
Conversation.
Yes, I guess it goes back to, as an audit and risk committee, you're absolutely right about risk appetite. You're absolutely right. If you like, the 175 and the 150 is an expression of risk appetite to an extent, yes? And so that's why, if I hadn't thought of it in these terms, but you've raised the question, that's why I posed the question, does 300% debt to revenue ratio sound good to or acceptable to the committee when you potentially got rate increases for the three waters of 1%? That's what I see, the picture I see. Yeah, and so it was really just a litmus test, really, if you like, because council has to consider this issue further. But you're absolutely right, it is a risk appetite thing.
So I'm just wondering, in terms of the other papers that are presented to us today, does there need to be a comment that is made to ask the team to do a bit more work on that and understand the
100%.
impact?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's how we acknowledge this issue and ask for more work to be done, because at the moment we don't have definitives.
And it's a lot easier, I think it's a lot easier, but it may not be, to see the picture when you look at the financial strategy when you get to that section. There's two graphs that I'd refer you to that hopefully would show you why the question came up.
And so I'm guessing that will be for the item 7.5, the review for audit of the draft long-term plan. So maybe we can pick that point up there and make sure that it's raised. Let's do something about it. That one. Right. Excellent. Thanks, team. was going to keep rolling. So we're now on item 7.4, which is the review for audit of the draft consultation document for the LTP. Niall?
Madam Chair, would it be possible to make perhaps switch item 7.4 and 7.5? Would it be, I'm just wondering if that's preferable to deal with the full LTP before you go to the consultation aspect?
Don't see any. No. Committee seems happy with that too. Thanks for your patience, Niall. Welcome back. Just a reminder, team, we're on 7.5. Item 7.5.
Sure, thank you again. So this report is seeking the committee's review of the draft long-term plan that staff has prepared for audit. The audit is commencing, or the full audit is commencing on Tuesday next week, on the 30th of January, and runs through until mid-February. So I circulated separately a PDF of the full long-term plan, and it's dated the 18th of January. And contained within that is 8 sections, or 9 sections, including the audit opinion, which is not yet available, of course. So it starts with an introduction and an overview of some of the key issues that the plan's dealing with. The second section addresses the draft forecasting assumptions. Then we have the financial strategy, the infrastructure strategy, the groups of activities and performance measures in section 5. Section 6 covers off the financials. Section 7 is our policies, including the draft revenue and financing policy, and there is a summary of the significance policy there as well. And section 8 is our council controlled organisation, so the likes of Waikato Regional Airport, Hauraki Rail Trail, etc. So the process from here is, as I said, for the audit to start next week. Once that is worked through, we will present the long-term plan back to this committee at your March meeting, and then that will go to council for sign-off along with the consultation document, and then consultation will kick off in March and run through till April. So obviously it's quite a large document, so I don't propose to go through that in sort of specific, but I'm happy to take any questions on the draft long-term plan.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. Any question?
I just wonder about some of the photos that we're using. Are they proposed to be actually used? And some of them are actually 2 terms old. They're very historic. It's whether, we should be having some more current ones. There's some that go back to 2 terms ago. It's just sort of questioning some of the layout of some of the relevance of some of the pictures. Is there an opportunity for some more current photos? Given, people look at it and say, well, that's an old photo because there's previous mayors or previous councillors that haven't been.
It's got different hair.
I've got a lot of different here, but when there's different mayors as well, it's sort of doesn't reflect the current looking forward, but I don't know, I'm guided by what's done in the past, and am I just
we can actually update the photos. That's no problem. I'm happy to talk to comms about any further updated photos that we have. These were just placeholders for the time being. They can definitely be changed. That's no problem.
Well, we're talking photos. I thought it was quite funny how we were talking about reducing the spend on cycling, and we had photos of cyclists. And
the relevance. You did right. That is,
Any other more substantive comments from that? I might ask Renee from Audit New Zealand if she's got any comments, given she would have heard the discussion that we had in relation to the debt to revenue ratio, and what that looks like from the 3 Waters perspective in the next 10 or so years.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the moment, no comments from my side at this point. As Niall mentioned, our audit will kick off next week and then we'll get into it. I don't know if Claudia, if you've got any questions at this point.
No, I think the comments would be when we have a look at the numbers that drive everything, that will determine if we have any audit feedback on that.
Okay, thank you. And if we refer to the discussion that was just had, is the expectation, Manoia, that we flag that discussion within this recommendation somehow to council?
Well, all I was going to point out, if I could, Jamana, was in the financial strategy section. What is it? Section 5?
Section 3.
Section 3, is it? I'm not sure. I've got the same graph, and there should be a graph in there about page 4 of that strategy. I don't know how it looks from this, but which has got percentage rate changes, 3 waters rates versus non-3 waters. A bar chart with a Manhattan on it. And hopefully what you see in that chart is very big increases, and I'm not saying you're hoping for big increases, but hopefully the picture you are seeing is very large increases in the 3 waters in the first 1, 2, 3, 4 years, and then drops down to about 7% in the 2028, and then tails off. Now there's that graph, and then if 2 graphs down, hopefully, is the council debt graph. I don't actually what page that one. Oh yes, that's what page is it?
So that would be section 3, page 24, or if you're looking at the full PDF, that would be at page 101. 101.
Thank you. And so 101 is the first one, and the second one is on page, what's that page?
103.
103. So in 101, hopefully you will see, as I mentioned before, we've separated out 3 waters and non-3 waters, because the non-3 waters is quite significant, but it tails off on both, and particularly in the 3 waters tails off to a very low rate in the last few years. Then if you jump across to page 10, the debt one, on page, what is that, 103, sorry, 103, and you'll see in that one it's got our debt limit and when we breach. But in that table we've also shown, again, what debt relates to non-3 waters and what debt relates to 3 waters. But hopefully that clearly shows you, hopefully it's clear to see where the breach is caused. So looking at what I saw was, gosh, our debt's getting up to 120 million for 3 waters, and it ends up at just over 100 million by the end of the 10-year period. Okay, just over 100 million. And if you go back to that other chart where you got the 3 waters with the rate increases, look at the rate increases for that. It just the picture looked wrong to me. And so, as I mentioned before, 300% debt to revenue ratio with low rate increases doesn't add up. If we were to, for example, so at 2028, we're at 7% rate increase for the 3 waters. And that's the benchmark I've used, 7%. If we were to keep them going at 7%, I don't know, that's a big call from a public perspective. But if we did, we kept the 3 waters rates at 7% increases right to the end of the 10 years, this 10-year period, the debt to revenue ratio would be about 260%, roughly. So it's starting to bring it back into what I would consider more prudent levels. And that's an opinion. That's an opinion I'll test with our rating agencies. And to be honest, our rating agencies, I'm interested whether they're worried about that. They're possibly not. They possibly don't care. They might say, well, look, we're only looking at your headline number. So what you do below that. But that inevitably, a change of that kind of actually saying, let's not drop down to low rate increases for the 3 waters. Let's try and get the ratio to a level that we think is more appropriate. That inevitably affects our top line, our headroom. Yeah. Okay. It does have a spin-off there as well. So I will demonstrate that in more detail, not tomorrow, but when I've had a bit more time to put it together. I'm going to flag it with council, like I flagged it for you, And it's something to, in my view, that council needs to reflect on before it puts the draft down.
Well, sort of in that summer page, and I've got it in an attachment. I'm not looking at it in body of our agenda, section 3, page 22, our revenue and expenses. And our revenue is lower than our expenses in the forecast 10 years.
Yes, we are running deficits. There's certain things that we're not funding.
Right, okay, so it should, yeah.
And we're deliberately not funding.
Not funding, yep. No, that's good to understand. And then if I go back to, that probably would answer my question to page.
Just on that point, I think actually, good point you raised, that's from the I&E, income and expenditure. It might be better to take the from the, which don't include depreciation, which some of the depreciation, as you know, we're not funding.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah, because it's, it looks like it's a clarity. Because the risk that we've faced in the last few years is that we haven't been rating enough. That we've been dropping down, and so I just want to have comfort that that's not going to get worse. And that's where I was just looking at page 14, section 3, page 14. It's our LTP 21-31 expenses compared to actual, and LTP 24-34, and again, I'm a bit confused, but perhaps that's partly because of the depreciation.
What am I showing there? Gosh, what am I showing?
Because we've got actual long-term plan 24-34 being lower than the expenses estimated for 21-31. Page 14, section 3. I'm confused by that. That they're lower, that going forward they're lower when I would have thought they would have been higher.
It is supposed to be that way, but I'm 25 put them around the line. I might actually, you're right. What I was trying to point out, the actual cost to provide our services increased by more than what we had projected.
That's.
Oh, no, I see. No, sorry. So we estimated the bottom line. Oh, that the titles are around the wrong way. Yeah, sorry, on my fault.
Sorry, it took me a while. It's page 91 of 419.
We estimated the bottom line. Well, I'm sorry, I'm confusing myself now.
Yeah, well, I'm confused because I would have thought their costs would have been high. Actually.
There's no question that the estimated costs were lower than the actual costs. That's what I was trying to point out. But I even look at my graph here, and I've got it round the other way.
Right, it's round the other way.
Yeah.
So just point of clarification, just to. Yeah.
Can I just go back to that other one you raised about revenue and expenses? Sorry. I just realised we have to, by law, have a balanced budget, and we're not having a balanced budget. So we're actually, our expenses do exceed our revenue in terms of how it's interpreted by the site accountant. So it's actually, and we make the point in our strategy why.
Yeah.
So actually, it actually does highlight that we're not balancing our budget. We have passed resolution. So it's kind of. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but we actually not
that transparency.
Yeah,
that we,
perhaps we had that note.
Yeah,
perhaps we had that note to that graph that we have an unbalanced budget and it's due to these specific things. Yep.
Any other comments from the committee?
Just going to the graph. I'm just trying to interpret. Okay, expenses estimated. Yeah, those titles are definitely, sorry, around the wrong way. But sorry, if I can just interpret that graph now that I'm convicted. Sorry. So the first few years, see how of that graph in the blue line, which is actually actual and LTP 24-34 is actually the blue line. You will see that the gap in the very early years is significantly higher. So the actual costs that we incurred were significantly higher than what we had in the LTP for 21-31 for those years. So the titles are in the wrong way, but that is the picture I'm trying to show. Yeah, that's the switch.
Yeah. You're checking that we're reading it?
No, that's good. It's good. It's you do this and to be honest, you get lost. After a while. I do.
Yeah. And that's why we get auditors.
Excellent. Okay. Any other comments in relation to the LTP? Otherwise, I'm going to move to the recommendation. We've got those changes that need to happen.
Yes, yes.
And then there will obviously be knock-on changes as a result of the change from 150 to 175 that will impact that document.
Yes.
Yeah. And then in this, we also need to flag that more work needs to be done in relation to the revenue charged in association with three waters, given what the projections in close to 10 years' time look like. Okay. So that council is on notice. And when you say that you need to do a little bit more work in relation to having a look under the bonnet, is that prior to audit starting on 30th of January, prior to adoption of LTP?
Prior to adoption. Prior to adoption of the draft. I mean, our view has been we have to have a document ready for audit that all the financials align, and that's what we've done. And there's just a couple of issues that require more discussion. But we don't want to be changing any of this document now because we're ready to go. But it'll be flagged for council before the draft is released.
Okay, so if I move us to recommendation in relation to item 7.5, which is the committee receives the report, we recommend council adopt for audit the draft LTP supporting documentation, listing all of those particular strategies, policies, etc. And that the committee notes the supporting information will be reported back to us in March for adoption and issue of the audit opinion. Okay.
So that'll be at the completion of the audit process.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll have the audit opinion or the draft opinion at that point.
Excellent. Can I please have a mover and a seconder?
Happy to move.
Seconder and Adrian seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, Kalmana. Thank you. Over. So now we will go back to item 7.4, which is the CD of the consultation. Back to you, Noel.
Thank you. So now that we've looked at the supporting information for the consultation document, we can now turn to the consultation document itself. We've got Andrew here as well from our comms team. So you'll see there that the conservation document that was circulated separately focuses on the affordability challenge and council's response to that, which is prioritising its capital investment programme, focusing on those projects that it must to do. We have included some projects that council wants to do to achieve its goals. And we've looked at some ways to defer our costs, and that is hopefully the theme and the message that you get when reading the consultation document. So I've set out in the report the key topics that we're proposing to include in the CD. And yeah, Andrew, do you want to add anything further?
I think that's a good summary. No, I'm happy to take feedback.
I guess obviously it starts off with my comment in the scene setter. I just wonder if there's an opportunity there to capture that at the time of writing this. You know, like the thing is in April when we're out for consultation, or March out for consultation, and that is presumably we will know more than what we know now. But is there some way of capturing that, you know, we're with the government? I don't know. Whether there's an opportunity there to actually show more transparency and reflection of where we're sitting now at this current period of time and the uncertainty, and that we should know more. You know, we will expect to know more in the coming months, but this is where we're at the moment. I don't know. It just sort of feel it sort of reflects our position a little bit more clearly.
Forward. Yeah, essentially that's something that will go out as part of the consultation document.
Yeah.
There will also be a forward in the long-term plan after consultation.
Yeah.
So that'll be saying, you know, and presumably you would want to comment on the public feedback and things like that. So there'll be an opportunity to update your forward at that point as well.
Yeah, I think we had about this previous where we didn't want to blame things outside of our control, but we just wanted to make sure that they were acknowledged. And those things created a lot of uncertainty in the local government space. So it's good to get your chance to give an updated view of that. Close to the time. Any other comments in relation to the seating? Oh, okay.
I'm sure there'll be a few things come up tomorrow with some of the other councillors.
Madam Chair, if it's possible, just to raise a couple of points with the consultation document. So we're quite focused this time around in putting the efforts into our council website for consultation. So rather than putting a huge amount of sort of cost and effort into the design of the consultation document and the printing of that as we have previously done in past long-term plan years, we're looking at having this as more of a digital based document on our website and putting that effort into how we present that on our council website and with the budget tools and things like that we can have available. One thing that I did want to raise is that we had some questions and we're interested in any guidance from the committee around the inclusion of some of the smaller projects in here because the consultation document needs to be focused on the important issues for the district and the important issues for council. So we've got some things in here, for example, around our community playgrounds and the stage of the civic centre. So we did question whether or not we should include those in the consultation documents. Do they hit our significance and engagement policy? And also, but is that something that the community is going to be interested in as well? Or do we exclude those from this document? And perhaps do they detract from the more strategic issues? So we were just sort of to be guided by the committee and any comments you might have on that.
Thought between being transparent and making decisions, and sometimes I'm happy for them to stay in there in the sense that people see that we have considered them.
They're the ones that are going to be commented on. Whether you put them in or not, any consultation we're going to get, there'll be people saying, why haven't you done this and why haven't you done that? So the fact that they're in there, if you put them in, shows that they have been part of the process of determining what we do. So I have no problem.
There's a real place for them, especially if I don't understand, the whole strategic development point of view that the council is getting on. But I do know that suddenly the kids are all using the playground down the end of town, and families are gathering, and those kinds of things. So it's a real visual. Not only is it visual within the document, but what's happening around our town, and you can see those things, and they're just easy things that please people to see that the town has got some vibrancy to it and they can relate to easily.
I think you've got your answer on that one. But I do want to come back to that point because it's likely to come up as part of the audit in relation to I guess the transparency and the sharing of information using different communication tools or channels. So the focus really is the website versus printed copies that get distributed to different places for people that might want a printed copy. So I'm hearing that we should at least give you feedback on that. So does the committee have any comments about that specifically?
I think there should be some printed copies that are available. I do know there are still people that don't use the digital space, like that. It's not their form of that they would rather, and they want to sit down and read through and go back and read through it. And if you just need to push a button, then you lose what you're reading, then something else goes somewhere, and in the whole thing. And so I don't think that you need to. I think that we certainly are getting to a time where digital is the place that we want to be, but I know there are still people that still want the calendar, that still want certain things so that they can have them in front of them. And it probably is an age thing, but I also know that.
And they're the ones that do comment.
Yeah, they have the time to really put in the comments, and people are getting a lot more skilled at it, but they still like to be able to do that. So it may be limited copies that you have, but there's still a place.
We will be developing, so Noel's right, there won't be the same emphasis in terms of the time and energy put into a design, but we will be developing a Word document that is adequately presentable and can easily be printed off. And that's the main support of the digital.
So we just reflecting on that, if we think about in 2021, which is when we had our last long-term plan, we had a professionally designed and printed document, and there was quite a cost attached to that. So this time around, we're thinking, let's put our energy and effort into our website and making sure that what we've got in our website is really, really well presented, rather than necessarily putting that effort into the presentation, and design of our consultation document, because,
I support the emphasis.
Yeah, the focus changes from having something that's colourful and bright on there to something that's actually going to be easy to interact with. I think in that digital space, it's how you interact with it is the critical thing to be able to make submissions. So
I think what we'll find is that people, who really want to delve into the detail would probably be the ones that would download this consultation document and read it in full, whereas other people might see that more website and,
precisely
interact that way.
Yeah.
I think you got your answer on that one too. And given that we're talking a lot about affordability, I think it speaks to that too. So unless there are any further comments?
I've just got one question, just with the Resource Recovery Centre and the conversations we've had. Are we there yet in that conversation for a long-term plan? Like, are we, because often we go in, we've sort of formed a view pretty much of things, and are we there yet? I'm just sort of trying to get my head around what's sort of being considered as probably a big step, and I'm just trying to get my head around the process. And I know that the last time we consulted on transfer stations, I don't know that it was actually that, it didn't really tell the story very well. And obviously the question was asked and it was obvious there was going to be a no. But yeah, it just worries me a little bit, because it will be a contentious one given the change that we've embarked on in the last few months. And it's just the flow-on effect. And I'm just trying to get my head around what does that part of the consultation.
Yeah, so it is a discussion that we were having right up until we sent this out.
Oh, okay.
And I think it'll be fair to say from ASIC's perspective, there is need to develop the business case to understand the implications and the full suite of options available before taking that out to the committee, so that they have something solid to look at and consider and weigh up. And
that's exactly what. Yeah, at this stage we're sort of still quite high level.
So I guess it's flagging that things are still happening in this space.
Yes.
They've put in there about the business case needing to be developed.
Yeah.
We've taken out any reference to, I guess, a possible conclusion, which was in there previously.
Yes. So that would be helpful.
One of the questions that may not be appropriate for tomorrow would be, from council's perspective, whether the consultation on this, once we have the business case, should run alongside the long-term plan consultation, or whether it should be kept separate. But that's something for tomorrow. I guess that's the conversation.
It's a timing issue. It's again, we get caught with timing, and we're not. I feel it's a bit premature now, and I'm trying to get my head through that process because.
So I think we were, it was a matter of timing. And as Andrew said, the ASIC's team are developing a business case, but I understand that won't be available in time for the issue of this consultation document. So what we were trying to do is to signal the work that's happening in this space. So there's both short and long-term work that's needed to be done to maintain our existing transfer stations and, continue their operations, but also looking forward to, that centralised resource recovery centre hub that council has signalled, and we've mentioned in there that we are developing a business case. So yeah, and we've included the funding for that. And in talking to Louisa, she's also indicated that there may be external funding from the waste levy that could be available. So we've signalled that in here as well. But yeah, I understand that, you know, this is something for council to really consider, how far it wants to go in expressing its, you know, the possible future in this area when we don't quite have that information.
Yeah, I think there's a risk there. It's a risk.
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, I just had one other question too, just in the roading part. Being kind of circled. I just felt there was some confusion around numbers, because it talks about roading, and our roading accounts are about 20% of our total annual spend, or around 17.8 million, with, you know, NCTA Tutahi contributing 6.3. But then if you go down further, we're talking about budgeting 5.4, and just trying to make sure that our numbers all align when we talk about what does 17.8 capture.
Is this the page 20?
Page 20 and 21.
Reading separate documents, I haven't got numbers.
Yeah, it is page 20 and 21 of that separate file.
Yeah.
I'll make sure to check it, but and will make it clearer. Top of my head, without having read through it, going back to the notes, the 17.8 is the roading budget. But the numbers that come after that refer specifically to payment renewals.
Okay, perfect.
So
yes, that's. I knew there would be. Yeah, there was some difference there that it was. You know, I just wasn't
so
aligning.
It might not be clear if you hadn't picked it up. We probably need to.
But it's there. It does say payment renewal program, but yeah.
But it gets a bit lost.
There is quite a number of figures quoted in that section.
Yeah. And if Joe Blogs is going to read it, how are they going to interpret it, isn't it? And is there a way of showing it in a way more clear? No, that's great. That was all I noted. Thank you.
Don't sense we have any further questions, so I'll move us back to page 76. The agenda, the recommendations are that we've received the report. We recommend for auditing the content of the draft LTP consultation document, and we'll note that this will come back to us post audit to our March showing. I'm happy to move. Can I please have a seconder? Yeah. Adrian seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Okay.
Aye.
Thanks, Kevin. I might shift us to item 8.3 on the agenda, because I noticed that we have Angela Jane. Is that okay with you, Niall?
Yeah, that's
Okay, so we'll shift to 8.3, and thank you for keep pushing through, team. Are you saying you're on it?
Oh, it's actually Angela's talking to the committee, so
Excellent.
there's nothing particular for me to add. Sorry.
So page 127 of the agenda, the LTP external review. Welcome, Angela. We'll take the report as read, but if you have any summary comments, just brief summary comments, that would be helpful. My name's Jadine. I'm the chair of the NPDC Risk and Assurance Committee, alongside all of our fabulous Risk and Assurance Committee members.
She's met most of us, trying to meet Joanne, but Angela did our onboarding.
Oh, excellent. Are you there, Angela?
Good morning. I am here, but I'm having trouble turning on my camera.
That's okay, we can hear you.
So you're not in your pajamas?
No, I did put a boost on.
Excellent. So, Angela, if you have any summary comments for us, that will be fantastic. The committee members would have read your report, and thank you for that. So, yeah, just a few brief summary comments, and then we'll open the floor for any questions. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Look, overall, I found a high level of consistency with all the legislative requirements, all that mandatory content that has to go into all of those documents. So I think the team did really, really well there. I think the small inconsistencies I found were partly from a working document. I think some of those matters in the financial statements, I'm sure, were just the next iteration. We're going to take care of those things anyway. And the other matters, as I said, they're all reasonably minor in nature. In fact, there's plenty of long-term plans out and about from past years that would have had plenty of those things showing. So from a compliance point of view, I think they've done a grand job. On the consistency side of things, I suppose I went looking, I was being a bit of a nitpicker to find things for them, but the standout elements were reflecting a little bit on your earlier conversation you've had today about your debt ratios and your story about breaching, but also meeting your capital expenditure. So yeah, that story didn't hang together so well across all the documents. So I think in raising your ratio, you'll be able to simplify that story across all of the documents, and that will make things a much easier read, and it'll hang together better, I feel, from the stories that are in there. The other issues about consistency, it's a little bit about how you're treating these imminent and already some of the legislative change that the government is making. So the story about the waters, it's going to make a lot of sense to a lot of people that you're saying carry on, just as the way it was. But you actually have taken a different step with the Strategic Planning Act, and you're still addressing those requirements. It's tiny, the amount of text you've got, but you are taking a different approach to the two changes of happening in legislation. And for a reader that's going to read it all and go looking for those things, I think that's an area that, it could be a little bit confusing for people. Other than that, happy to take questions. Yes.
Bye. Thank you. Committee members, any questions, comments?
Just think it's great that you've the team engaged you, Angela. You obviously, you have a little bit of knowledge of our council, obviously now, and I think that your comments are, very helpful.
From my perspective, some really nice catches. So well done, and also thanks for providing a good sense that the team have done well in terms of the preparation of the LTP and the CD. And I'm curious how that feedback has been taken into account or will be taken into account.
Not at what you've got here, to this committee, but we will work on that. And the timing just didn't quite align to get the papers to this committee.
So now it's just confirmed that the feedback in relation to the report will be taken into account in future iterations of the LTP and CD. So unless there are any other comments, I'm going to say thank you, Angela, for the report that you've done for MPDC. It's been very helpful, and also given this committee assurance that the team's on the right track.
So, especially with the 175,
excellent.
Guide it, gave us some, a high level. Right.
Excellent. So the recommendation in front of us on page 127 is that the information be received, and we provide feedback on the review, which we have done. So I'm happy to move. Can I please have a second?
I'll second.
Via Joanne is seconding. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you, Angela. Kia ora.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair. And so we'll move to item 8.1 on the agenda, which is the LTP audit update letter, which is just for information, isn't it, Niall?
Yes.
Is there any comments? Shall we move to the recommendation? Do you have any comments? The only one I have is that we're referred to as an audit and risk committee versus a risk and assurance, but that's minor. No. Okay. All right. So recommendation on item 8.1, page 91 is that the information be received. Can I guess have a mover and a seconder? Get James moving. Councillor Bruce is seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And so our last item is 8.2, which is the LTPQA. Welcome back, Niall.
Thank you. So this report presents to the committee 3 quality assurance papers. The first of those is the audit self-assessment, and I have attached the letter from Audit New Zealand and the self-assessment that's been completed by staff. We provided a copy of that to Chair Jadine, and Jadine helpfully provided some comments over the summer break, and that audit self-assessment has been returned to the audit team. The LTP health check is a Taitura checklist that is about the readiness of the long-term plan and the project overall. And lastly, the QA checklist has also been completed by staff, and that really goes through and looks at making sure that all the legislation has been complied with and everything has been covered off. So yeah, just happy to take any questions from the committee on those three QA papers.
Just please, there's no ones to call the undertaker. Oh, that was quite funny.
We're somewhere in between on the road to good health and time to enter a marathon, I felt.
Yeah. Yeah, they're only a handful of 3.
Now, in the page now. Sorry, any other comments from the committee?
Nope.
Now, in the LTP QA checklist, there were a few items where some were still in progress. And so I'm guessing that those will just be knocked off over time. So an example, page 5, it talks about depicting something graphically. Page 8 talks about the digital campaign that you were referring to before, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm guessing that those will just be completed as the information.
Yeah, well, the process moves to that point, yes.
Otherwise, it looks like we're in a really strong position. Great work to get us there. Anything else that you need from the team other than to close out that recommendation note?
No, it's just really for the DOS committee to review and be assured that, off we're at.
Yeah. So I guess the only question is there a risk of some of these things like to be developed by February? Are there any risks around it taking till March? You know, like you're confident that you're going to meet like item K, review and develop funding and financial policies. It's a 3, December to
So which one are we looking at here? Just so I can.
Page 12.
Is this in relation to the LTP QA checklist?
Yeah. That's item K. That's just it's a 3, and it just throwing it out there. I'm not saying that it's a risk, but just trying to make sure that there are no risks to completing it. So some of those things that are in progress, are you confident that they're going to be met in time? Is probably my question.
Yeah, so item K, page 6 is talking about the transfer of the water services. Is that the one you're?
No, I had financial at page 12.
Review and develop funding and financial
policies. Am I in a different document?
No, different document. Yes, I see. Yes, page 12. Yeah, well, largely that was actually covered off somewhat at today's meeting.
Yeah.
So I think it was just reflecting when we had done that.
Yeah.
The development contributions policy is also being worked on. The revenue and financing policy has subsequently largely been completed. So yes, I'm very confident that will be completed. So I think this was reflecting the fact that this was actually prepared in December, in early December, and was kind of an evolving process. So at that time, we hadn't quite finished that. So it was reflecting, we still have a little bit of way to go, but at your December council meeting, those things were subsequently dealt with largely. So
So, yeah.
The rating would actually now be 4 or 5.
Yes, and that's probably what I was looking for, so that's great. Well done. Good work. Acknowledge the effort that everyone's gone to get this through.
And to that point as well, I'm on page 36 of the 93-page document. This is the attachment there. So I loved it how it said has your local authority resolved to operate an unbalanced budget. Will do, that kind of. So my assumption is that has been cleared now too, given the comments that were made earlier overnight.
It will be.
Sorry, yeah. So the resolution will come when we adopt the annual plan, so it won't be till the 26th of June that we do that.
I love it.
It's on our radar.
So
we certainly couldn't say it's done, but I think it was just flagging that yes, it's part of our process. We'll make sure that happens.
Excellent. So I've heard that the in progress ones will be progressed to the extent that they need to be, and then we'll be ready to enter the marathon that the document talks about. So if we go back to the recommendation, will be to receive the information and provide feedback on the audit self-assessment, the LTP health check, and LTP QA checklist. Can I please have a move that and second it? Last one, team.
I'll move.
Fire Joanne is moving. And I will second. So those in favour, please say aye. Against.
Aye.
I think that is it. So general business. Yeah, it was a very robust discussion, and I'm looking forward to how that pans out tomorrow at council, especially in relation to I would call the borrowing, see what that looks like moving forward. But I will, if you guys don't mind, I will close with karakia, and then we can go this morning tea. So thank you again to the team for the documentation that was presented. There's a lot of hard work that's gone on behind it, and thank you for your engagement. It's a lot easier Hui today than our December one in the afternoon. So let's just resolve it. We only ever have morning risk and assurance committee meetings. Oh yeah, excellent. And thank you to the Audit New Zealand team, Renee and Claudia. And thank you for being kind to our team in relation to the audits coming up. Kia ora. And on that note, me inoi tātou, kia tau, kia tātou, kia tō, te atu wātua tātou arikia, i whakati, me te aroha, te atua, me ngā takitangas ki te wairua tapu, ake, amene. Kia ora. Thank you.